everyone. Welcome to Festival Hall and the Reedville Fishermen's Museum lecture series. This is our second one of our winter-spring lecture series. We have two more to go. Of course, you're here to hear Jeanie Finnegan, who will talk and sing on memories and music. Without further ado, Jeannie is here, so I'd like to have her come up and get started. I didn't do too much of an introduction because I figure she'll do a wonderful introduction and background. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, I will plan on telling you just a little bit about myself. First of all, thank you so much to the Reedville Fishermen's Museum and inviting me to come and speak on a topic that I'm truly passionate about, that's very close to my heart, and that I have personal experience with, as all of you do, have personal experience with music, right? So it's a very powerful, miraculous thing, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I live in Maryland, and I do my work primarily in Maryland, although I am branching out into Virginia. And I work with long-term care communities, assisted living, memory care, adult daycare, and home health care agencies to work with them on their programming for residents with dementia. But also, there are applications for music to be used therapeutically with lots of different individuals. Those who are receiving care at home for long-term illnesses, for rehabilitation, those who've had traumatic brain injuries or stroke, those who are struggling with other types of chronic illnesses or disorders. And it's rare that I meet anybody who has not been touched personally by having to either be a caregiver for someone in their family, or someone in their family is caring for an extended family relative or a neighbor who is dealing with someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. It's so common, there are such great needs out there. And so I started my business in 2011. Melodies and Memories is the name of my company. Before that, I was working at a continuing care retirement community, which has different levels of care. And I was finding, even though I had an administrative role there, I was really drawn to the residents there, and specifically those who tend to, what I would say, fall through the cracks in the different types of programming that they have, because they can't engage in large group activities that require a lot of cognitive skills. Believe it or not, something like bingo is a very cognitively stimulating exercise if you're using multiple cards especially. And, that involves a lot of higher level reasoning and locating numbers and recognition. And there is quite a number of people in long-term care that can no longer engage in those kinds of activities. And so music can become one of the very last forms of engagement that is really effective and powerful. And so I realized I really have a passion for people and for caregiving. And I had been a caregiver for my mom, who lived down here in Burgess, actually, and she passed away in 2005. My family has a long, long history with the Northern Neck. My mom did some research, but also one of her sisters, one of my aunts, has done quite a bit of research, and we found out that on my mom's side of the family, we have quite a long history. Our ancestors basically originally settled near Kilmarnock. The very first of our ancestry came into according to my brother, Fleets Bay, which is near Kilmarnock, and my great-great-great-grandparents are buried at an Episcopal cemetery somewhere in Kilmarnock. So we go quite a long ways back. But about 35 years ago or so, my mom started coming down here with a friend, and they would go fishing. She told my brother Dave Stevens, who lives, I always say it's Ophelia because he lives on Ferry Road, right near the ferry, but it's technically his address is Heathville, which doesn't make sense to me. But he's been down here for that many years almost too. So I do have a family history, and then in 2001, my family, my husband and I purchased a home in Reedville in Bay Harbor because I have 6 children and 8 of us descending on my mom's house. Got to be a bit much for everybody. So we bought our own place and we've been coming down ever since, and we've immediately fell in love with the area, and the people down here have been so welcoming and so gracious and friendly, and we just love the lifestyle and the waterfront way of life, the rural waterfront way of life. So anyway, that's kind of my connection to the Northern Neck. But I wanted to talk a little bit about why I ended up writing a book. So here I was working in a long-term care community, and I decided that I wanted to incorporate music with caring for those who need, basically long-term care. You can receive long-term care at home. In fact, there are many, many informal family caregivers who are providing long-term care at home for their loved ones. I do want to get a show of hands. Raise your hand if you have ever been a caregiver for anybody, family, friend, or whatever, professional caregivers, at any time, or if you're currently providing care for someone. Raise your hand if that's... Now, keep your hands up and just look around the room and see how many there are. It usually ends up being at least about 2/3 of people in a room that are or have been caregivers at some time. As I mentioned, I helped my mom when she was battling cancer, and she did end up basically living with us for several months before she passed away. And I've been a caregiver to other people in my life, so I do have a personal investment in this message as well, and experience with it that's personal, not just academic. Anyway, so I started my company and started taking music to people that could no longer access it for themselves. And all of us here can listen to music pretty much whenever, wherever we want to. In our cars, at home, we can go to concerts, we can go out to a bar, a club where somebody's playing. There's many, on our phones now, it's very accessible, music is everywhere. But for those who end up living in a long-term care setting, or who become isolated even at home, access to music becomes much more difficult. And for many, unless someone brings music to them, they will no longer be able to listen to the music that they've listened to all their lives, that's very connected to their milestone memories, to their personal histories, and what they've always enjoyed. That's really added to their quality of life. All of us listen to music for the primary reason we listen to music is what? We like it. It's beautiful. It sounds good. We enjoy it. It's just a nice activity. But there's also times where we use music on ourselves therapeutically. Like, I need to de-stress. I got to put on such and such music. This will help me relax. Or I need to go exercise. I need to go work out. I need my music to motivate me. I don't like working out unless I have music. It just stimulates something, right? And spiritually, music can be so uplifting, and it can help us connect to God, connect to our church community, and to other people. There's a spiritual component. And I realized as I was doing my work, I started working with individuals that really needed one-on-one interaction. And it becomes a very intimate thing when you are in a patient's room or a resident's room, and you're really talking to them. If they're able to tell me, I can learn right away the music that's most meaningful to them. Sometimes I can't get that information. I have to use clues. Maybe in their room there might be patriotic items that maybe they served in the military. Maybe there's religious artifacts in the room that tells me, oh, this person has a religious background. Maybe they would want to hear hymns or some sort of spiritual music. Sometimes I can't know, and there's no way to really find out. And so it becomes a little bit of a mystery-solving thing, but I usually can go a little bit by their age, but I never rely on that. If my mom were living today, she would be 80, and she absolutely loved the Bee Gees and 70s disco music and stuff like that. She liked a lot of different kinds of music, and many of us are that way. If someone said, what's your favorite kind of music? I'd have a few. I couldn't just narrow it down to just one. And so I would work with an individual and kind of see what they respond to. And I play guitar, so maybe I'd start off with what a well-known older song, if they were an older person, some kind of old sing-alongs that we all know. But eventually I can usually hone in on what's most meaningful to that individual. And I was finding that even for the most cognitively impaired individuals, I was getting really amazing responses in lots of different ways. It might have been things that they were able to say that they couldn't say before the music. Residents that were either nonverbal or could not answer appropriately in any verbal way could sing all the words to a song that they knew. And many different songs, not just one song. And then I would see this time and time again. But sometimes there would be a situation that was uniquely powerful and uniquely impactful. And I started writing down things that would happen, something someone would say, or a certain kind of response that I would get from the patient themselves, or maybe a family member, or a staff member. And I started writing them down, so mostly I wouldn't forget this amazing thing kind of verbatim that somebody had said or something they had done. And then as time went on, I was kind of collecting these little anecdotes, but I really wanted to build them into stories, because unless you know kind of the person's scenario and what they were going through and why this was so amazing, it would make even more sense. And ultimately, I decided that, gosh, this could be a book, this could be a collection of stories. But I went on to do some research into it, talked to some neuroscientists about why music is so uniquely powerful. And there's so much information, of course, on the internet as well. And I became a certified dementia practitioner and just did a lot of studying on my own and kind of put it all together in my book. We know that stories are a very powerful way to illustrate principles and to really paint a picture for something that we want to convey. And so I believe that stories can be a really powerful way to do that. The first few chapters of my book talk about why and how music is so powerful in so many different ways, and how we identify with music. How does it become personally meaningful to us? And then the rest of the book is all stories, true stories, and they're all very different from each other. Music to me is one of God's miracles. There's just no other way I can describe it. I think we take it for granted because it's so accessible, and it's all around us, and we've all grown up listening to so many different things and studying music, but it really is a miraculous thing. If you think about, I like to think of it similar to how I think of language. There's 26 letters in the alphabet. There's a finite number of letters, but an infinite number of ways to combine them into words, and then the words into sentences, and into stories, and poems, and research, and song lyrics, and on and on. There will never run out of words and combinations of words. Music is the same. There's a finite number of notes, but an infinite number of possibilities of ways to combine the notes. Then we add rhythm, we add dynamics, we add style, we add lyrics. We'll never stop, we'll never hit the end of, we've created all the songs that could ever be written. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's quite miraculous. The human voice is an instrument, and in fact, instruments are sort of modeled after the human voice. The vibration of the vocal cords, every instrument has to have a vibration element to create that sound and that music. And somebody once said, the human voice is the only musical instrument that God fashioned with his own hands. And I think that's a really beautiful quote. I love all the variety of instruments, but I see music as miraculous for those reasons. But it's also because of how it affects the brain like nothing else can. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I also wanted to mention that when I first started thinking about the idea of writing the book, I considered, and one person advised me, actually a geriatrician that I'm very close to, advised me, make sure that it's a very secular book, because you want to make sure that it has the widest appeal in the medical community, and you know, you don't want to turn anybody off if you put anything too spiritual in there. And I said to him, the problem with that is I can't separate that out, because so many of the stories that I'm writing and so many of the things that are happening have a spiritual component that can't be denied, that can't be explained by neuroscience or, you know, some sort of clinical thing. It's just miraculous, something that's happening. And I like to believe, and I do believe, that that is God at work, using the music to get through to a person and to connect that person in ways that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So there is a spiritual component to my book, because it's truly what things that have happened that I feel, you know, probably fall into that category of a God thing. And so there is some of that in there. It's not all of that, but that's why I consider it an inspirational book, as well as something that I hope will educate people about the power of music. One of the most miraculous things about music is the way that it affects the brain. It affects the human brain like no other art form. Now we can see in real time, because of brain imaging, brain scans, MRIs, we can see what's happening to the brain when someone is listening to music. And especially if that music is very personally meaningful to them, that they have a real connection to, it releases endorphins and serotonin and all these feel-good hormones that course through your body. So there is a reason why music makes us feel good. But it also stimulates multiple brain centers simultaneously. So these are the brain centers that are stimulated all at once by meaningful music. And of course, what's meaningful to me is going to be unique, because it's going to be tied to my personal experiences with it, memories associated with it, my personal preferences, all of that. And it's like your fingerprint. The kind of music you like is like your fingerprint. There's going to be things about it that are completely unique to you. Anyway, so when they play music for you or me or whoever, here's the areas that are stimulated. First, your long-term memory center is stimulated. Music is hardwired to our long-term memories, and that's why somebody who has advanced dementia can still recall the words to an old song that they have a connection to. It's tapping into the long-term memory, but not just the long-term memory of the lyrics and the tune, but the emotions that were going on around that song, the experiences and what kinds of emotions were stirred when they heard that song or when they were enjoying that song back in time. So your long-term memory center is stimulated. Your speech and language and vocal fluency center of your brain is stimulated. This is all at the same time this is happening. So again, let's say I can remember the words in my head, sort of, because my long-term memory center is being stimulated, but now my speech and language center is being stimulated, so I'm able to get that out. So I've had patients I've worked with that have had strokes and have something called expressive aphasia, where they can understand words, but they can't express them. They can't find the right word or get the right word out. And after a period of music where they're able to sing the lyrics, they are also able to speak a little bit afterwards, more fluently. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story if I have time at the end about that. So we've got long-term memory center, speech and language center. Then it's also your emotional center is being stimulated when you listen to music that's meaningful to you. So it can be a song that it brings you to tears. It can be a song that is your feel-good kind of music, but it's stimulating your emotions. And it also stimulates your motor control center. That's why when we listen to music that has a good beat, we all want to do what? Clap, snap, dance, depending if you're a dancer, move. You know, even a toddler, a 2-year-old, my 13-month-old grandson, you turn a certain kind of music on and he starts going like this, and it's being stimulated in his brain. He likes it, but there's something that's actually happening in his brain that's part of that. And then the last center is the spiritual center of who you are. And that's not something we can see on a brain scan, but it's certainly a very, very real thing that happens. So think about the power of that. All of those parts of your brain being stimulated simultaneously. Also, you know, you have two hemispheres to your brain. You have your right and your left, and the right brain is more associated with creativity and art, you know, artistic ability, imagination, and then your left side is more methodical and numbers and that sort of thing. Which side of the brain do you think music is mostly processed in? The creative side, you would think, right? It's completely a dual hemisphere process. When we listen to music, it is a dual hemisphere activity because music is actually very mathematical. People who study music theory, it's a whole, that was the worst thing I ever took was a music, well, maybe not the worst, but it was hard. Music theory is very difficult. They know that students that understand music theory and study instruments do better at math. And yet it does definitely embrace that whole creative, artistic part of us, right? But it's a dual hemisphere activity, and that is another reason why it's very, very powerful. These things about how it affects our brain, that doesn't change just because somebody has moderate to advanced dementia. That's the other thing that's interesting. Those same parts of their brain are being stimulated. And regardless of the damage that's been done in the brain because of a disease process, because of a stroke, because of a traumatic brain injury, there are some areas that can still remain, and sometimes we don't always know until we see what response we get. Do you guys remember Gabby Gifford? She was a congresswoman who was shot in the head. She had brain damage from that, and she lost her ability to speak. If you Google this, you can find some videos of her. They were using music therapy to help her regain her speech. And the way that happened was she would sing familiar songs, and it sounded like she loved a lot of songs from like the 60s and folk music and stuff like that. But then they would start putting in other words instead of the lyrics of the song, getting her to try to say other words and remember how to fill in other words. It's a very, very interesting thing how that happens. Now, if I were to say to you, you know, such and such a song, one of your favorite songs, write down all the lyrics to that song right now. Here's a piece of paper. What would you have to do to come up with the words? You'd have to sing it in your head or hum it. Something mysterious about the melody works with bringing out those words. Without the melody, it's much, much more difficult for us to recall those words. Why do we teach little kids things by putting them to music? It sticks. They learn it faster, but it sticks around longer too. It goes because that music helps forge things into our long-term memories. So it's got applications for so many things. Music has applications for so many things, and I have realized over and over and year after year just how powerful that is. I wanted to ask you how many people here have ever studied an instrument, sang in a choir, musical theater at any time in your life? Raise your hand if you've ever done any of those things at any time in your life. Almost everybody. I would say 85, 90%. That then becomes a little bit, now you have a different attachment to music because of that. Something about your history now is affected by that. And many of you are musicians to this day, playing instruments at your church or pursuing it just as a hobby or whatever, professionally maybe. And the other thing I want to ask you is, if you had to rate the importance or the significance of music in your life, what has it been? Can anybody here say it's been completely insignificant in your life? We won't judge you if that's you. But if that's you, just raise your hand if it's been completely insignificant in your life. 0. I've had one person over the last 8 years say that it has been completely insignificant in their life, and I could barely get my brain around that. I guess I was judging them on the inside. No, but how many of you would say it's been extremely important in your life, music? It's almost everybody. Most people fall, in my book I have a little quiz in there about what songs are most meaningful to you, what they make you think of, what memories come to your mind. It's like a little quiz section. It's really fun to do with other people because you start thinking about how many of our memories are tied to songs. Oh, that's the song when my prom, when I was dating, when my husband and I went on this vacation, when our kids were little, we used to sing this song in the car on the way to vacation. We have all these memory associations with songs, don't we? And the same is true for every person. So just because somebody now has lost some of their memories or has had a damaged area of their brain, it doesn't mean that they can no longer at least even tap into the emotion of that song or some aspect of that song. Almost without fail, I get some sort of response, almost without fail. I want to talk a little bit about the need out there in the world. We all have needs. We've all used music, like I said, on ourselves therapeutically. But the needs are really great for how much music can be a soothing balm for someone who is struggling. And it doesn't just have to be with Alzheimer's or dementia. There are many different kinds of chronic illnesses or disorders and terminal illnesses that people are grappling with. And music can be a very key component to real quality of care and quality of life for those individuals, many of whom are people we love, right? I often think when my mom passed away in 2005, I wasn't doing any of this. I've been a musician my whole life. I started singing in high school and, got a guitar when I graduated from high school, and I sang with University of Maryland chorus, and I've pursued music my whole life, but I had put my guitar away for many years because I was raising my 6 kids, and I was singing in church and stuff, but I never played my guitar. So when my mom was sick, it never occurred to me to get my guitar out and sing songs because I was out of practice and I barely remembered anything. But I knew that my mom really loved music, and spiritual music was really important to her. And so we did play music for her and some things that she came to at my church. I dedicated some songs to her when she was at a retreat, different things like that. But if it was happening now, I'd have a different approach. I've learned so much. I would do things differently. I would do more with music. And so that's one of my messages, if you have the opportunity to bring music to someone that you love, if there's someone that you want to really connect with, if there's someone that you want to help elicit some, responses from, if you're working with anybody who has any sort of cognitive or memory impairment, take the opportunity now to incorporate that into your time with them. So that's one thing. And then the other thing was that, even though I didn't get a chance to do it with my mom as much as I would have, if it happened now, because I learned so much, it's become even more part of, why I want to tell other people how important it is and not to miss the opportunities. I meet family members a lot who are struggling with the visits that they have with their loved one. Does anyone here have a close friend or a family member who is in a long-term care community or that has Alzheimer's or dementia and is being cared for either at home or in a community? If you don't mind raising your hand if you do. Right, so it can become a real challenge how to spend the time with them, how to make the most of a visit. If you're visiting someone or spending time with someone even at home, and maybe they don't recognize you, or maybe they're not able to engage in many of the daily activities that they once were able to, music is such a common ground. Almost everybody, and I mean this like 99.9% of the time, you can get a response that can end up creating a beautiful moment of joy and connection with that loved one. I was working with a gentleman in a memory care community a number of years ago, and his daughter was there visiting that day, and I didn't really know what music was personally meaningful to him just because I hadn't met a family member yet, and none of the staff really knew for sure. That's one of my things I try to do is educate long-term care communities on how to do a better assessment when they have a new admission, of what kind of music is really meaningful to each and every new admission, because that can be extremely beneficial for the staff to know and for the family and the staff to work together to provide that kind of music to all the individuals there. Anyway, so this gentleman and his daughter was there visiting, and I just kind of decided to do this song Edelweiss from The Sound of Music. A lot of people like show tunes, and Sound of Music is very sort of universally liked. And when I started singing it, the daughter kind of got this like surprised look on her face, and her father really paid attention to me in a different way, kind of took that to the next level. Then he started singing the words and singing the melody a little bit. He didn't get them all right, but he got a lot of them right, and his daughter just started crying. And she told me afterwards that Sound of Music was one of his favorite all-time shows, and that song specifically, I just happened to land on it. I sing that song a lot. But that song specifically meant a lot to him. But the main thing was, she said, I haven't heard him sing in like 4 years. And he used to sing all the time and hum and sing around the house and stuff. And it meant so much to her to have that moment where her dad sang like that. So it's a really, the needs are out there, and it's important for us to be aware of them, not just in our own personal lives, but even in the wider community. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Alzheimer's and dementia pie, I'll call it. A lot of times those two words are used interchangeably, but Alzheimer's is just one of several different dementias. If you look at dementia as a pie, Alzheimer's disease accounts for about 60 to 80% of all individuals who have dementia. But there are other causes. Parkinson's disease can result in a Parkinson's-related dementia. There's something called vascular dementia, which is what my dad had. He passed away a year and a half ago. He had something called small vessel vascular dementia, so damage to different small vessels in the brain. There's also something called dementia with Lewy bodies, which is a different thing. There's a frontal temporal dementia. There can be medication-related dementias caused by side effects interacting, and that can be resolved. Sometimes can be resolved. But all the other diagnosable dementias are not curable. Right now, there is no known cause or cure for Alzheimer's disease. And the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's, other than having a genetic marker for early onset Alzheimer's, the biggest risk factor is age, because we're living longer. But it is not considered a normal part of the aging process. Dementia is never considered part of the normal aging process. There's always a cause, there's a reason why, and I encourage families to try to press your physicians to find out what is the cause, because there always is a cause. Some can't be seen on a brain scan or with imaging, but other things can be ruled out so that a more accurate diagnosis can be made. But a lot of times families are just being told, yeah, mom or grandpa or whatever has dementia. And I meet people all the time, and I'll say, do you know what kind of dementia? No, I don't. You didn't say what, it's just dementia. Well, they can present with symptoms differently, the progression can be different, and the treatments can be different. So it's pretty important to know. And that's a population that I work the most with, just because that seems to, the most with for sure, because there's a large percentage of, probably 85% of people that are in long-term care for any reason have some level of dementia. But there are a lot of young people, surprisingly, young people living in long-term care settings because they either have an end-stage disease or a traumatic brain injury. So people can become ventilator dependent. Right now I have 3 patients at one facility who are ventilator dependent, who are all under 30 years old. One was a skateboarding without a helmet accident. One was a drug overdose, and he stopped breathing, and so he was without oxygen, so there was damage to his brain. They resuscitated him, and his quality of life is extremely poor. He still responds to music, though. It's truly amazing. One of my sons, one time I went to visit a few people on a weekend, and of course I asked the facility permission to bring my son and a friend, because they really wanted to consider ministry and visitation in a nursing home, and so they came with me, and the three of us sang Amazing Grace to that young man, and it really changed my son and his friend, because first of all, they were peers, you know, and to see someone, as much as you think you have problems, right? You go to visit somebody who's on a ventilator, you don't have problems. And so it really impacted them that way. But they also saw this young man respond to Amazing Grace. We sang Amazing Grace, and he got what on his face was like a sob, you know, like a grimace, like not a pain thing, but like he was just sobbing, and it was just very, very impactful. And crying doesn't always mean a bad thing. Crying sometimes is just a release, an opportunity where we're so moved, we just have to cry. You know, it's not always a negative thing like I'm so sad and devastated. And that's what it was for this young man. And so my belief too is that every person has such extreme value, no matter their age, unborn to 105, no matter what their age, no matter their health, no matter their cognitive status. God doesn't give up on anybody just because it looks like they're never going to respond to something again, or you know, they're just declining and they're never going to get better and they're only going to get worse, so we should just sort of give up on them. Well, we may never be able to cure what's wrong, fix what's wrong, or change the trajectory of their health, but we can change moments, hours, days of the quality of life for them and for us. So while I set out to, you know, help people and add to their quality of life and reach them with music and, you know, evoke some sort of responses or help families connect with their loved ones, while I set out to do all that, and it's valuable, and I think that it totally has mattered. I mean, I wrote this book, right? But I've been inspired as much as I've given inspiration. I've received back so much from the different individuals that I have visited. Just, you know, dramatic responses, and even people who have such joy and such an ability to cope. I mean, the human spirit is a powerful thing, and so much boils right down to our attitude toward what we have to deal with in life. I had a patient that I visited. She passed away a couple of years ago, and I had the privilege of singing at her memorial service. But this was an African American lady in her 60s, mid-60s, who had a degenerative disease that eventually caused her to be ventilator dependent. And when I first started visiting her, she could speak. Sometimes she was off the ventilator, but even if she was on it, she could still time her speaking with the breaths that she was getting. And I learned a lot about her, and she loved contemporary Christian music. She didn't like black gospel music as much as she loved just contemporary Christian music, whatever was popular at the time on the radio. So I learned, you know, a lot of those types of songs, and we just had these amazing moments, and she would sway her head. She couldn't move much else, but she could sway her head and make a lot of facial expressions. But she declined to the point where she could still blink, but she couldn't move many other facial muscles. And they have a lot of amazing technology that uses retina recognition, where she could look at a screen with a keyboard and different kinds of symbols for phrases, and she could put sentences together and things like that. It took a lot of willpower for her to eat. It's very difficult to learn it. You have to have such concentration. It calibrates, you know, your eye,
but then you have to be so focused to only look at what you want to say or it won't pick it up. And she was determined to be able to communicate again. And she learned how to do that system. And one day I went and visited her, and it was the first time I was there when she was using it. I had known that she was being trained on it, but it was the first time I was there when she was actually using it. And she was so anxious to say something to me. And so her speech therapist was there helping her, and she ended up saying, "I love you so much, you're my guitar angel." And I mean, what are you gonna do? I just lost it. You know, it just was so precious. Another time, she had a bedside table that was completely loaded. CDs and notepads and paper, notebooks, and you name it. And she kept trying to direct me to a particular, as I found out, this was laborious communication, because she didn't have her Toby. It was called Toby, the computer program. She had a chart with rows of the alphabet, and I had a pointer. I'd point to which row of the alphabet, and she would blink if I was on the right row. Then letter by letter, A, B, C, and I had to write down what letter. I was getting it all like losing track in my head what she was spelling out. Anyway, she finally got me to get this particular CD, and it had a song that she wanted me to listen to the first song when I got in my car. She let me take it with me. Or whatever the song was, but it was called "I Can Pray." And basically, when I can't do anything else in this world, I can still pray. And that was her motto. And she kept a prayer journal. Her niece would come and visit her, and they would communicate, and she would write down different prayer requests that she was praying for other people in the nursing home. She was one of the most debilitated people in the entire nursing home, because the ventilator unit is the most debilitated patients. And yet her attitude and her perspective was for others, you know, and was for prayer, and it was just, how can you not be inspired by that? And so musically, it was just a very powerful, very, very powerful times that I had with her doing music like that. I want to tell you one or two other little quick stories. What time do I have till?
Another 5 minutes.
For talking or for total?
Talking.
For talking, okay. Because I'm going to do like a few minutes of music just for fun. I'll just tell you real quick. This is a funny story. So I have a chapter in the book, because this is heavy material. I get it. It's heavy to talk about dementia and people who are terminally ill and all that. But it's also very inspirational. If you read the stories in the book, they're not downer stories. I haven't gotten that feedback. I've gotten people saying that they've been very inspired and it's been helpful and has moved them. But there's a chapter in the book called Comic Relief, because funny things happen and people can maintain their sense of humor or develop a sense of humor that they never really had. And there was a gentleman, he's in the book, and his name, Miles. These are all fake names. Sometimes in my head I have to remember, use the fake name. Anyway, his name in the book is Miles. But he had been a professional singer-guitarist, mostly guitarist, had some phenomenal guitars apparently, but they were all with his son. But his son brought in this really cheap, you know, guitar with plastic strings and everything, just so his dad could have something to fool around with, you know. And Miles was 93, by the way, at the time. In a wheelchair, but pretty mobile. He could move that wheelchair. And when I would come in and sing to different people in their rooms, Miles would hear me, and he would find me and park outside that person's door. Sometimes he would have grabbed his harmonica, and he'd be outside their door playing his harmonica while I'm singing to the person. And so he loved classic country music. Spiritual music, like traditional, I would say traditional hymns and classic country music, you know, Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline type stuff, are probably the two most requested genres of music from the individuals that I visit. There's totally exceptions to that. But if I had to pick the top two types of music, that would be it. Anyway, so Miles loved classic country music. Well, one day I came up to his room to sing to him, and he was playing his guitar, but I looked and it didn't look like a normal pick. So I don't know if you know what a pick is, but it's very thin plastic triangle, real thin. And I looked and it looked really weird. It was something kind of thick. And I'm like, Miles, what is that? And he said, well, I didn't have a pick, so I found a piece of wood and carved myself one. And so I'm thinking, first of all, you had a pocket knife in your room. Where did you get a little piece of wood, and did nobody notice you in there whittling away in your room? But he was so determined in his pursuit of music that he carved himself a guitar pick. And he was really proud of it. And I said, you know what, why don't I give you one of mine? It'll work a lot better than this, 1/4-inch thick little piece of wood. You would have thought I gave him $100. And, oh, are you sure you can spare it? I said, they're about 25 cents, Miles. Please, by all means, have it. And sometimes I sing to a group still at this community. I sing to a group of residents with memory impairment. And when I used to go, when Miles was there, he would get up with me sometimes and play his harmonica, and he could turn his wheelchair like he was sort of dancing in it. We created a dance floor in that group, and different ones would get up and dance, but Miles would dance with his wheelchair. So the responses to music and the pursuit of music really are very, very inspirational, and there's definitely some comic relief in the book. So anyways, I guess to close, I've learned that there are many, many opportunities for volunteering. There are many opportunities for ministry. There are probably opportunities in your family or in your neighborhood, your church community, to share music with others. I have a section in the book called Ideas for Sharing the Miracle. How can you bring music if you're not a musician? You got a CD player, some CDs, or on your phone streaming services, or an Alexa, or music channels on someone's cable TV. There's any number of things, or even just singing along or putting on a station and playing Name That Tune. There's many, many ideas that you can do. I've also learned to trust the music and what God can do with it more than I trust what I can see. Because if you look at somebody, there's a video on, you can find it on YouTube, I believe. It's called Alive Inside. And it's about a program called Music and Memory, and how they get little iPods and little personal headsets with playlists of songs that are personally meaningful to each resident, and how residents that pretty much seem like closed down and look like maybe they won't get a response, and you put on the headsets, and this guy named Henry on the video, he just comes alive and he starts talking about how the music makes him feel. It's very unexpected when you see what he kind of looks like. So we can't, we know that phrase, you can't judge a book by its cover, and the same is true when you see someone living in long-term care or a memory care community. I trust what the music can do more than I trust what I can see. And remember that even small moments of connection and joy are really important and valuable, and we will become more so later on as time goes on. So in closing, I wanted to play a few songs. These are a couple of my most requested songs that people tend to ask me for, and feel free to sing along or not, but it's just kind of, music is always fun. Music brings people together. It breaks down barriers. It crosses all, ages, races, backgrounds, socioeconomic status, right? It's a great uniter. So I'll just do that right now. So I thought maybe I'd start with Edelweiss, since I referenced that in my talk, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, right? Very sweet song. By the way, Edelweiss was not an Austrian folk song, a traditional Austrian folk song. It's written to sound like that, but it was written by Rodgers and Hammerstein for the movie. But a lot of people think, oh, that's an old Austrian song, because it really has that feel to it.
You
hymns have been a frequent favorite, frequent request. Of course, when people are struggling with illness and serious health challenges, and their families are as well, of course, spiritual concerns come to the surface. You know, that saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole, right? When it comes right down to it, and people are grappling with end-of-life kinds of concerns, spiritual things become more important and sometimes are resurrected, and there can be a lot of healing, a lot of beautiful things that take place in that realm. So one of the most well-known, and this is one of my mom's very favorite traditional hymns, was In the Garden, you know, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me. So I'm going to tell you a cute story at the end of this one. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. So I sang that song to this lady. This just happened a couple of months ago, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have put that in my book, because it was very, very heartwarming. She said, oh, I love that song. And when I learned that song when I was little, one time I said to my mommy after we sang it, I said, Mama, who's Andy? Andy walks with me, Andy talks. I thought that was so cute. It was so funny. Anyway, that's a very funny moment. Okay, another very popular, almost everybody, even people who really aren't country music fans at all, everybody seems to love John Denver's Take Me Home, Country Roads, right? Anybody here originally from West Virginia? I'll dedicate it to you. Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country road, all my memories gather round her. Miner's lady, stranger to blue water, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste of moonshine, teardrop in my eye. Country road, take me home to the place Sure.
Okay.
I'll do one more because it has a good little story with it. So, did any of you guys remember seeing Coal Miner's Daughter about Loretta Lynn's life? Great movie. I love that movie. Sissy Spacek, who plays Loretta Lynn, does all her own singing in the movie, and she's really good. Anyway, so there's a lady that I still sing to. I've been singing to her for, I guess, 8 years now. She's in her 60s. She has MS, multiple sclerosis, and she has been ventilator dependent since I've known her. And she's moved from one facility to a different one, and I actually sing at both. So I've gotten to stick with her because she's one of my favorite people. But anyway, she loves Loretta Lynn, anything Loretta Lynn. And so she always wants me to sing all these Loretta Lynn songs. One day I was singing Coal Miner's Daughter to her, and there's a verse in there that says, in the summertime we didn't have shoes to wear, but in the wintertime we'd all get a brand new pair. Well, while I'm singing it to her, I said, in the summertime we didn't have clothes to wear. In the winter, and I just kept singing, and she burst out laughing. And I just stopped and I said, Dorothy, what? Why are you laughing? She said, I'm picturing all these naked children running around the mountain. So now whenever I sing Coal Miner's Daughter to her, it's like our joke. It's like our inside joke. You know, we both start laughing. It's pretty funny, but I'll just do some of that one. Well, I was born a coal miner's daughter in a cabin on a hill in Butcher Holler. We were poor, but we had love. That's the one thing that Daddy made sure of. He shoveled coal to make a poor man's dollar. My daddy worked all night in the family coal mine, all day long in the fields of hoeing corn. Mommy rocked the babies at night, read the Bible by the coal light. Everything would start all over come break of morn. In the summertime we didn't have shoes to wear, but in the wintertime we'd all get a brand new pair. From a mail order catalog, money we made from selling our hog, Daddy always managed to get the money somewhere. Yeah, I'm proud to be a coal miner's daughter. I remember the well where I drew water. The work we done was hard. At night we'd sleep 'cause we were tired.